Tyagarupananda Maharaj in our midst. Today is also very blessed day. Today is Mother's Day. And Swami Tyagarupananda ji is going to speak on the human face of Holy Mother. Swami Tyagarupananda ji Maharaj has 39 years of monastic experience, which includes serving various Ramakrishna mission, educational institutions, both school and colleges, as principal and teacher. He is a doctorate in economics and has taught economics and English during his distinguished career before joining and after joining. He has been a guest speaker on economics, philosophy, religion at prestigious Indian and international universities and institutions. He regularly teaches and conducts classes on these Indian scriptures like Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Chandi, Bhagavatam, etc. His overseas engagements in the past have included lectures at London, Edinburgh, Dublin, Abu Dhabi, Dubai and Bangladesh. He joined Ramakrishna Mission as a brahmachari in 1985 and has been primarily serving educational institutions throughout his entire monastic life. Currently, he is the secretary and Adhyaksha, because that is a twin center, Mutt and Mission. So he is serving as a secretary and Adhyaksha at Ramakrishna Mission, Mutt and Mission, Malda in West Bengal, India. And he conducts classes in English and Sanskrit for students at this school. That is a high secondary school and secondary high secondary both. So he teaches the students. And we have a long association. Both of us have joined almost the same time. We have our brahmacharya, sannyasa almost at the same time. We stayed for 2 years in a same room in our brahmacharya time. So we have a very close friendship for a long time. So I am very happy personally that Swami Tyagarupananda ji has come here and has kindly accepted our request to speak here on very appropriate subject, the human face of Holy Mother. Today is the long day for him because this is his third lecture he is going to deliver today. In the morning he delivered a talk, very beautiful talk. Soon you can find it in our YouTube. Poems of Swami Vivekananda. We do not discuss it very much, especially in our Ramakrishna order. Here the topic of our lectures is a little bit different, but he spoke on a very beautiful talk, Swamiji's poem, and Swamiji actually expressed deep philosophical insight in those poems. So he delivered that talk. Today is also a blessed day because today is Shankaracharya's birthday. So he delivered his second talk in Badrika Ashrama on Shankaracharya and Ramanuja. And this is his third talk. So I hope and I am pretty sure that he will not disappoint you. So without much ado, I request Swami Tyagarupananda ji to deliver his talk on the human face of Holy Mother. Thank you.
Om Yathagner Dahika Shakti Ramakrishna Sthita Hiya Sarva Vidya Swarupamatam Saradam Pranamamyaham. Respected Swami Prasannaatmananda Ji Maharaj has given a very liberal introduction for me. I only hope that I live up to the expectations. At the outset, I will convey my pranams to the Holy Mother, Sarada Devi, today being the Mother's Day, and to all the mothers present here as well as elsewhere. I remember when I was first frequenting the Ramakrishna mission with an idea of being a permanent member as we are now. Often Bagh Bazar, an area in Calcutta where we have the Holy Mother Sarada Devi's house, would be a natural place to go to. There on the second floor, rather a small house at the time, it has had some extensions later on. A cramped space with Holy Mother's room in front and a veranda where devotees would be sitting. I would frequently watch a person tight in meditation without the inclination to look elsewhere. This was Ranendra Maharaj, Raja Maharaj, somewhat senior to me in age. That was how I met him first. I knew very well that when I proposed this topic, he would quickly agree on it, because I knew very well that he had a deep respect for the Holy Mother. And to cap it all, it was a mere coincidence, I tell you. It was also the Mother's Day. So, any member coming to the Ramakrishna mission, while we look at the history of the place, I must confess that I was a little surprised when I saw this organization run mainly by male monastic members, having at its head, in addition to Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, Ma Sarada as well. What was her role really? Well, I had been a student of the Ramakrishna Mission School. I had an inkling of who Sarada Devi was. But to put it into perspective, this was somewhat perplexing to me. This is my confession. As days rolled on, I understood her role all the better. Maharaj has mentioned the title Human Face of Sarada Devi But in the initial days, Sarada Devi's face was a very difficult thing to see, because she would always be behind veils. In fact, one of the officers of Dakshineshwar temple, where Sri Ramakrishna had stayed for more than 30 years, and where Sarada Devi also spent about 14-15 years while Sri Ramakrishna was alive. His name was Bholanath Muhuri. He was the treasurer. When asked, he had said, আমি শুনেছি বটে তিনি এখানে আছেন, দেখিনি কখনো। I have heard indeed that Sarada stays in this place, but I have never seen her. She was exceedingly cautious that she will not be under the male gaze, and thus her modesty was her jewelry, Sri Ramakrishna would say. One of the nieces of Sri Ramakrishna was Lakshmi. You can see her name in the biography. And Lakshmi was an adept artist. She could mimic others very well and even perform drama on her own. You can see a wonderful reminiscence of Nivedita, Margaret Elizabeth Noble, in her book, The Master as I Saw Him, where she says about an incident which happened when the Holy Mother, Sarada Devi, was in Bagh Bazar. Margaret had just come to India, and Vivekananda was careful that her introduction to this society, Indian society that is, should have the least amount of obstructions. A Western woman has come not to govern but to serve, and that to Indians who were in those days under the British rule. And she is coming from London, from the Britishers. So a Britisher without the inclination to govern, with the willingness only to serve, was rather a quaint feature. It was so much so that Vivekananda had warned him that it wouldn't be an easy job for you. So Holy Mother had been very careful that this work of Nivedita should be an easy one. Although she was a foreigner, and with the restrictions applicable for a Brahmin widow, Holy Mother was a Brahmin widow by that time. The year was 1898. And in those years, Holy Mother had the courage to invite Nivedita to stay with her in the same house for a number of days before Nivedita moved to another house nearby, so as to start the school. That was her willing, that was her aim. So in those days, a reminiscence of the Holy Mother, in her book, she says that, well, it would so happen that all of these women in the household, they were all Brahmin widows. Sarada Devi, Golak Ma, Yogin Ma, Lakshmi Didi, all of them would be staying together. After lunch, they would rest for a while. And those were the times of fun and merriment as well. So she narrates an incident when Lakshmi Didi, the niece of Ramakrishna, would imitate the idol of Jagadhatri, a woman goddess, right? Jagadhatri, a manifestation of Ma Durga. Lakshmi Didi is in that role, and Nivedita, can you imagine, would act as her lioness. She would crawl on the floor, and Lakshmi Didi would be there seated up. And Holy Mother and Sarada Devi and the other woman there would laugh heartily. So this is one intimate picture that Nivedita would, with her facile pen, gives in the book. Well, Holy Mother had maintained the restrictions that were expected of her. So how come that Swami Vivekananda has considered her to be the mother of the order? These are not merely words, flowery words, right? These were not so. In fact, at every one of the major steps that Vivekananda had taken, he had interestingly taken the permission of Sharada Devi. To name just a few, before finally deciding to go over to the West, that historic voyage, when he was in Madras, today's Chennai, he was in a fix, whether it was right to cross the ocean, and there was no money, right? And there was neither in letter as well, no one to recommend him as a delegate for the Parliament of Religions. It was a call from within, right? When an intuition is there, then formalities drop away. So the Raja of Kshetri and Raja of Mysore, they have inspired him. They have said that you are the right person to go and represent the Hindu religion. But they didn't know the rules of this great Parliament of Religions. He required to be forwarded as one of the representatives of an established religion. There was no letter of introduction for him. In this sequence, in this scenario, Vivekananda was somewhat in a quandary. Should he go or not? Was it a personal ambition on his part, or was it really the call of God, right? So he sent a letter to Sharada Devi, and the mother heartily blessed her. I remember when I first read this incident, I read it twice, thrice. I wondered, well, Sharada Devi, did she know where America was? Sri Ramakrishna had little education, but Sharada Devi had still lesser. But she had tremendous practical knowledge, and she had great faith in what Ramakrishna had said. She firmly believed that Narendra, the later Vivekananda, would indeed live up to the expectation of his master Ramakrishna. This is how Vivekananda, after obtaining the permission, came to America, and the rest was, of course, history. Even while in America, he would send strong letters to his Guru Bhais, his brother disciples. He was in a hurry to start a monastery, an organization. Well, the Guru Bhais, his brother disciples, keen on doing religious penances because they had seen Sri Ramakrishna doing great tapasya, penance. Sri Ramakrishna had said, Bhagavan labhi manushya jivaner uddeshya. The aim, the goal of human life is realization of God. And they had heard about his wonderful austerities. They too were inspired. They were moving from one place to another, places of pilgrimage in India. The idea being that a man of God should depend fully on him. They should have no permanent roof over their head, nor a secure place for food either, right? Depending totally on the Almighty, like a free-flowing river, they should test themselves about their renunciation, about how much they could depend on God, right? So this is the idea which is summarized in the Hindi saying, Ramta sadhu bahata pani. Ramta is wandering, bahata is flowing. So a monk goes on roaming from one place to another, like the water, which isn't closed in a pond, the free-flowing river. The water remains pure, no dirt accumulates. Similarly, a man who moves from one place to another without being tied down to a place or on someone else, has the full resignation towards God. That was the idea. And now comes one bombshell after another. The letters of Vivekananda, right? He wasn't pleased with the individual tapasya. He felt that it was selfishness. He felt that these brother disciples should dedicate themselves to the service of the poor, right? In his letters, he had said, if Muhammad doesn't go to the mountains, if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, Muhammad must go to the mountain. The story goes that Muhammad had once said that the mountains were destined to come to him. When it didn't, Muhammad said, well, I will go up to the mountains. So he would say, if the poor is unable to come up to you, the ashrama, to the school, why don't you go up to them and serve them? So these brother disciples were still not used to such advice. They had heard Ramakrishna telling them about penances, about tapasya, about spiritual practices. In these letters, as a part of this letter, he would say, we must start a monastery for women first. Holy Mother must be at the center of this monastery. This I must do. And then another one for men. So, Swamiji Vivekananda, in those initial days, 1894, long back, right? He had thought about a monastery for women. Well, ideas take time to fructify, to gather momentum, right? So he came back in 1897. And on 1st May, the Ramakrishna Mission Association was set up at the house of Balaram Bose. Balaram had passed away earlier, but that house remained a meeting place for the devotees and admirers of Ramakrishna. There, Vivekananda clearly laid down some of the principles that should govern the Ramakrishna Mission Association. After setting up the Ramakrishna Mission Association, they would have on Sundays weekly gatherings of this new association. He was often present in them, and Sarada Devi also would be present because she had earlier been consulted before this organization was set up. She had blessed this new organization, and whenever she would be present for these meetings, Swamiji would sing songs. He had a good voice. He was an expert musician. So Sarada Devi was like the beacon light, the silent blessings. But that was not enough. When there were moments of decision making, she was there, right? So I can narrate to you a reminiscence of one person, Kumud Bondhu Sen. They had been young men, great admirers of Vivekananda, the great lecturer, the all-conquering Vivekananda, right? Just as when I go to different places, I hear young men listening to Sarvapriyanji's lecture, right? So in those days, you didn't have those YouTube and Facebook after all. But the words of mouth were enough. The newspapers were enough. So Kumud Bondhu Sen, a young man, they were all prepared to see Vivekananda, his personality. In 1890, Narendranath, later Vivekananda, had left Calcutta, then traversed the whole length of India, and then left for America from Bombay. And after 7 years, he is returning to Calcutta, right? So, Kumud Bondhu Sen narrates how the greatly renowned Vivekananda now approaches Sarada Devi. Sarada Devi is covered with a veil, as usual, and Gulatma, her attendant, is standing by the side. And Vivekananda goes there and prostrates himself in front of her, right? She doesn't touch the feet even. Then she looks up to the others who have come along with him and say that, well, all of you must prostrate in front of her. But remember, she is all compassion. She has such an amount of compassion that if you touch her, she can easily take upon herself all your wrongdoings, all your karma, right? So instead, pray to her. That would be the right thing to do. So Swamiji himself shows how it should be done. He steps back and then others follow. Sarada Devi initially has her words being narrated over by Gulapma, but now she herself speaks softly. She says, well, it was indeed Ramakrishna's wish, your Guru's wish, Thakurer ইচ্ছে ছিল, that you should be a world conqueror. He had predicted that one day people in distant lands would revere you as a teacher. That must come to pass. In fact, when I was reading this today, I was wondering how true it had become today. And that Sarada Devi asserted there in 1897. And Swamiji kept quiet. Then he went on, you see, Mother, I'm in a tremendous hurry. I want to set up an organization, but I do not know how to do it. He appears almost like a giant caged up, right? His tremendous energy, others were not able to contain. His energy, his spirit, but his body had become weak. He had diabetes already. And he was then taken to Darjeeling for a while to rest. Darjeeling is in the northern part of Bengal, right? And there, while in Darjeeling, he learns about the fact that the epidemic plague had affected the city of Calcutta. People were flying in hundreds, somewhat similar to this corona pandemic, right? In Vivekananda's lifetime, twice it had happened. Plague had affected. And Calcutta in those days was the capital of British India. So it was an important city. When people started flying, Swamiji, with a great heart, he felt that something ought to be done. There wasn't enough money. He himself came down. And two of his lieutenants, you can imagine, one of them was Swami Sadananda, and another one was Elizabeth Noble. This woman who had come to educate the girls of India devotes herself fully to the relief. In fact, a reputed doctor, Radha Gobindo Kaur, R.G. Kaur, says in his reminiscences in later days, we couldn't imagine the amount of dedication that Nivedita had in this relief. Because we had seen her with the baby in hand. The baby's mother had died the earlier night from plague. And Nivedita was a refuge. Probably it was about to die in her lap as well. But there was no fear in her. Others were flying. They were afraid that it was contagious. But these lieutenants of Vivekananda were not. In fact, Swamiji issued a pamphlet which said, yes, citizens of Calcutta, don't fly. We are there by your side. We, the children of Ramakrishna, don't fly. And thus the people saw a new face of Vivekananda. That he was not merely a Vedantic preacher. He was willing to serve them as well. He was one of them. It was not that he was an armchair philosopher lecturing on the pulpits of Chicago Parliament. He was there on the ground, working with them, ever willing to be by their side. It was during this time that Swamiji in a fit had said that, well, we don't have enough money now. and said to his Guru Bhais that, well, if necessary, we can even sell off this new land of Belur. The land had been newly acquired. Earlier it had been on one side of the Ganges at Baranagar and later at Alam Bazar, and now they had bought a new land at Belur. The new monastery was about to be started. Holy Mother had gone there and she had done a puja. And now Vivekananda tells his Guru Bhais that, well, we are after all mendicants, monks. What is the necessity for these permanent assets, lands? Why can't we sell these off? Poor persons are dying. Why can't we serve them? He was such a strong personality that his brother disciples had to bow to his wishes. Only Shivananda Maharaj mildly protested. He said, see Narendra, whenever you take some major steps, you consult the Holy Mother, Sarada Devi. Why don't you do that? So as per Tarak Das wish, Tarak Maharaj, his wish, a number of them, Vivekananda, Shivananda and Brahmananda, they went to the Holy Mother. Holy Mother had again and again supported Vivekananda in his doctrine of Karma Yoga, serving the poor, right? Whenever his other brother disciples had been doubtful, Holy Mother had supported Narendra. She firmly believed that Narendra was the chosen instrument of Ramakrishna. That was her conviction. But this time it was different. She said, no, this shouldn't be done. Well, you are valiant sons of ours, that is Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi. But well, when the later generation of monks would come, they would require a permanent abode for themselves. They cannot live below trees like you have done. And moreover, can this great message of Ramakrishna die with only one reliever? This shouldn't be so. See, such a well-renowned personality whose names were echoing in American newspapers, Indian newspapers, now has to bow to the will of a lady whose face they can't see. Even Vivekananda was unable to see the face of Sarada Devi. She was behind veils. As I mentioned, the human face wasn't visible to others. But such was her strong conviction that Vivekananda retracted from his desire. The relief work went on. In the meantime, money also started coming. So Sarada Devi indeed in later days as well proved to be the mother of the organization. She was not merely the wife of Ramakrishna to be worshipped as a picture by his side. She was a strong, independent character. Vivekananda understood well as he went to different places in America as well as in London and in Europe. He was greatly attracted and admired the independence of women there, the ability to take strong decisions. Educated women were there in all walks of life. In fact, in the first mission and even in the second, when Swamiji had come to this coast, the West Coast, women admirers had supported him again and again. Well, whether it was the Hale family or whether it was Elizabeth Datcher in her cottage at the Thousand Island Park, or whether it was Mrs. Sarah Bull of Boston, women had supported him again and again. And when he saw the plight of Indian women, he was alarmed. He again and again thought that Indian woman must be raised. Just as a bird cannot fly without its two wings being strong, similarly a society cannot rise unless women are properly educated, nourished, and given independence. He wrote in these letters which I said, which were veritably letter bombs. I tell you, when we were young, me, Maharaj and others, these letters, even after 100 years, are such mines of inspiration, Such missionary zeal you can find in these. There he says in Sanskrit. Well, doesn't the scriptures say, Yatra naryastu pujyante ramante tatra devata? The meaning being, where women are worshipped, ramante, happily, the gods roam about. So how can a society rise unless we awaken a woman? But how should women be awakened? That reformation should not have a male hand, or it should have the least amount of it. That was his idea. In fact, it is with this idea that he had inspired Margaret Elizabeth Noble to come in. And now, back in India, he expressed his wish of setting up the woman monastery. Remember? That was his original desire in his letters from America. And he discussed this with Swami Yogananda. Yogananda was somewhat senior to him in age, but was exceedingly mature. And moreover, Yogananda was in charge of looking after the Holy Mother. After the demise of Ramakrishna, some of his disciples were always there to look after the mother, especially after the initial 4 or 5 years. So Yogananda reminded Narendranath, Swami Vivekananda, that, well, don't you remember Narendra? Our master used to say that Sarada is good behind veils. You mustn't expose her to the public. You can, well, set up a woman monastery, but you shouldn't involve the Holy Mother in this very much. As soon as Swamiji heard about this, he recoiled. He thanked Yogananda for this and said, well, you have done the right thing. In course of time, things took a different turn. The school that Nivedita set up had girls coming from different strata of society. And one of them was Sarala Devi. Sarala Devi, in later days, served the Holy Mother. And when the women's monastery was set up much later, in 1954, on the occasion of the centenary of the Holy Mother, just to narrate to you some dates so that you can understand the chronology, Vivekananda passed away in 1902. The Holy Mother passed away in 1920. In 1953 was the centenary of the Holy Mother. And there, the monks of the Ramakrishna mission decided that it was time that the desire, the ambition, the goal of Swamiji should be fulfilled. And this was how, after much debate within the Ramakrishna mission, right, the Holy Mother's monastery was set up, the Ramakrishna Sarada mission. And there, as the first president, came this student of Nivedita school. She became Pravrajika Bharati Prana. So this seed that was sown by the school in later days gave a number of fruits. And most important of that was an independent women's monastery that shouldn't have any connection with the male monastery as such. In fact, that has been the principle throughout. If you see the Ganges River, on one side at Belur is the male monastery, and on the other, it's somewhat close to Dakshineshwar, where Sri Ramakrishna did his tapasya, his penances, that we have the Sarada Mutt. In fact, to date, I have never gone to any of the Sarada Mutt centers. Although we have been in educational institutions, they also have colleges. We occasionally have talked over the phone, but we never have entered the campuses. Such are the rules. And it has been maintained strictly there, right? So to come back to the storyline, or rather to the incidents, so in course of time, Sarada Devi, as I said, outlived Swamiji. In 1902, Swamiji passed away. And now suddenly the Ramakrishna movement was, as it were, had no one to be at the helm of affairs. The country had known Vivekananda to be a great patriot, a saint, a scholar. And they had looked up to the Ramakrishna mission with Vivekananda in mind. Who was the second person in charge? Swami Vivekananda had authorized Swami Brahmananda as the next head. In fact, it was during his lifetime that he had judiciously made Brahmananda the head, because he had felt that he wasn't going to last long. But Brahmananda seemed to be too immersed in tapasya to govern the order, right? But Brahmananda gradually came out of his seclusion, solitude, gave him into administration. This wasn't easy time for the Ramakrishna mission. They were admirers of Swami Vivekananda who had said, well, Swamiji had inspired the independence movement. Many of the freedoms fighters have Vivekananda's works in their hand. Why shouldn't the Ramakrishna mission also come and jump into this freedom struggle, right? But Swamiji had said, the Ramakrishna mission must clearly be away from politics. And Brahmananda was keen that this should be obeyed. This order is meant as a religious order. And as its byproduct, you have the work of serving the society. Politics shouldn't be there as a primary focus. He was ever cautious about this, and he steered it ahead. There were difficult times when Nivedita, one of the foremost disciples of Swamiji, entered politics. She finally, on writing, said that she wouldn't be maintaining connections with the Ramakrishna mission. One of the dearest disciples of Vivekananda thus decided to stay away from the Ramakrishna mission, at least on paper. However, she, throughout her life, maintained contact with the members, but not with the organization on paper. Why? Because the police, the detective department, were ever on the lookout whether rebellious elements were taking refuge in the Ramakrishna mission, right? In fact, there has been a book published, Police Report and Ramakrishna Mission. I remember people had unearthed the details, how much police had been on the lookout. There was a little story to it as well. Those from Bengal might be remembering, especially the book Ananda Mat by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, right? It has that famous song, Bande Mataram, right? It's a famous song now, thanks to the modern music as well. So there in the Ananda Mat, that novel, you have a band of sannyasins who had fused together to bring changes in society. And the police in those days doubted that Ramakrishna mission was a covering for such an order of monks. With Vivekananda's fiery words, when many of the young revolutionaries joined politics, they thought that it was a mere covering. So it was a difficult time for the Ramakrishna mission, right? So it so happened, here the role of Sarada Devi came in, that in 1909, in one of the Darbar is open session, one of the viceroys said that, well, many of the young men are nowadays taking refuge in the Ramakrishna mission who actually are into active politics, right? So even the devotees of the Ramakrishna mission became scared, because police in those days were very, very strong in the British days, right? They even came and advised Swami Tyagarupananda, who was the administrative head, who was the general secretary, that those who have had earlier connection with the organized revolt and had later joined the Ramakrishna mission as brahmacharis should be asked to leave the order. Otherwise, there was a nagging fear that devotees would be leaving the order. Support wouldn't be coming anymore. So Swami Tyagarupananda somewhat perplexed by the different views, senior devotees coming in with these views, went up to Ma Sarada. Imagine the view of Sarada Devi. She listened to it calmly and said, how can it be so? Young men who have left their hearth and homes, taking the name of Ramakrishna, wanting to lead a religious life and a life of a recluse, how can they be asked to leave the Ramakrishna mission? Instead, Sharot, that is Swami Sharadananda, you go to the Viceroy and convince him that that is not our aim. We are not promoting politics. Well, it is, if it had been the fact that some of the young men had some connection with politics earlier, that was past. Now look at the present. They want to lead a good life. Why don't you support that? This wasn't easy, right? In fact, Sarada Devi's counsel was carried out to the letter. One of the American devotees of Swamiji, Josephine MacLeod, was very influential. She arranged for an interview of Swami Saradananda, and it so happened that at a later darbar, the Viceroy had to retract his words. He made a correction. It was rather rare, and which said that, well, we have come to know that Ramakrishna mission is not encouraging revolutionary elements. So people were, in a sense, happier. They breathed a sigh of relief, right? There came another point, another instance where there was another philosophical query, a philosophical quandary, you could call it, right? Swamiji, with his great philosophical outlook, had set up a center in the Himalayas. The place some of you will be knowing, it's in Mayavati, right? It had been his dream that there should be a place where Western devotees could go there and live in peace. Such would be the climate. Additionally, there shouldn't be any dualistic worship. The Advaita Vedanta, in its practice, with no photos of any gods and goddesses whatsoever. Well, that is easier said than done, right? All of us are used to worshipping from a very childhood. In 1900, when Swamiji went to visit that center in Mayavati and went round the monastery, he found in the house, in one room, the worship of Ramakrishna going on. To the inmates, that was natural. If you have the photo of Ramakrishna here, none of us would protest, right? But Swamiji wasn't pleased. After making a round of the monastery, he told his disciple, Swami Swarupananda, who was the head of the monastery, that, well, this is not proper. We had earlier resolved that there shouldn't be any photos whatsoever, because this is a place of non-dualistic worship. So because that was Swamiji's wish, the photos were all removed, but not always satisfied, right? In fact, one of Swamiji's disciples, Khogel Maharaj, Swami Bimalananda, was there. And he wrote a letter to Sarada Devi, right? That, well, this is an organization of the Ramakrishna mission after all. What harm it is that we keep a photo of Ramakrishna? What harm is there? It's not a photo of any other personalities after all. You can imagine, well, Sarada Devi, who considers her own husband veritably as God, Sri Ramakrishna, in whose name the Ramakrishna mission has been set up, and Swamiji himself has declared, the ever ratiocinating Swamiji has declared that he was an avatar, well, an incarnation of God for this era. Keeping his photo, should even this be discontinued? But Sarada Devi wrote back an answer. This is historic. She said, why? Swamiji had done the right thing. Our master, that is Sri Ramakrishna, himself was Advaitin. He had done the Advaitic practices. So what's the harm in having a center of Advaita practices. Just imagine, okay? Look at the scenario objectively. Here was a woman, he hadn't been to any school and college, but had spent her whole life in working for others, never having any children of her own, right? Sri Ramakrishna had once said to her, do you want a child for yourself? Don't be anxious. One day you will have so many children that you will be almost at your wit's end by listening to their words. So even this basic motherhood she had sacrificed because of such a husband, right? But she had kept her outlook towards God steady. This was the treasure that she had received from her husband. Steadfastness towards God, devoting herself to the cause of religious upheaval, right? And thus, even one of the most difficult practices gets her sanction. That, well, it isn't an error not to have the photo of Ramakrishna. If you think that these were minor incidents, it was not. Ramakrishna mission didn't have that huge size that it has today. It has almost 300 branches now, right? Coming to the Ramakrishna mission, our parents know that, well, they could be leading a difficult life, our parents, that is, we monks. But at least they have the basic necessities of life, a shelter above your heads, and basic necessities, food. Although they won't be earning any money, no bank balances of their own probably, but still they would lead a more or less okay sort of life. But that was not the days, right? It was difficult times for them. But even in this circumstances, Sharada Devi is the beacon light. Swami Vivekananda is gone. And Sharada Devi for the next 18 years, together with Swami Brahmananda, would steer this huge boat in course of time that was due to be bigger and bigger in scale, right? In all the Durga Pujas performed in many of the branches of the Ramakrishna mission throughout the globe, right? Durga Puja is a big festival, often performed over 4 or 5 days. And one of the elaborate ritualistic practices, very beautiful to see, but it requires plenty of mantras, mantras, Sanskrit mantras. Maharaj was uttering Sanskrit mantras. In Durga Pujas, you have plenty of them. But in that Durga Puja, in all the Durga Puja that mission organizes in its different centers, the sankalpa, the resolve is done in the name of Sharada Devi. Because in a Durga Puja, monks are not allowed the right to have resolve in their names. So Sharada Devi is like an ever vigilant person who stays throughout, ever awake in the order, as it were. So how was her household? How about her household? She has looked after the order. She had cared for the order. She had said, so much I had prayed when I went to the Gayadham, when I saw the huge monastery there, that when will our children, that is the disciples of Ramakrishna, have such a hermitage, a monastery? They are moving throughout the length and breadth of the country with no clear place where to have their food and shelter. Oh God, will you not give them a proper shelter? In later days she would say, so piteously have I prayed. Such was her mother's heart, right? But how about her own household? How did she look after that? When Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, Sharada Devi also had a desire that what is the use of living anymore? She didn't have any children to look after, isn't it? And in her vairagya, in her dispassions, she had started doing great tapasya at Vrindavan, at Benares. It was during this time that his youngest brother died. Abhay Charan had a wife, Surabala, who was slightly deranged. And after the passing away of Abhaycharan, Surabala, the young widow, gave birth to a child, a girl. Her name was Radha Rani. Well, Sri Ramakrishna instructed Sarada in a vision that, well, this is the girl which will bound you to this society. You want to fly off? You can't. This is the tie, the knot that will keep you grounded, right? Radharani lived for Sarada Devi for the next 20 years. She was born in 1900, right? People from outside would come and see that Holy Mother doting on Sarada Devi. And sometimes they would doubt, is this Holy Mother, the dispassionate woman? But that she was. In fact, towards the end of the life, when all earthly people that we are, we want to cling to our children, our possessions. It was during these days that Sarada Devi said, take away all of them. I don't want any of them now. Whether it was Radhu or the other nieces, Nalini, Maku, etc. All of them had their aunt Sarada to fall back upon. Even their parents were not dependable. Sarada was like a huge protecting wall that was rearing them up. Even when her family was divided, her relatives were happy that she stays on in Jairambati, her paternal village. Why? Because they were assured that money would flow. They knew the devotees like you are, that they were there at the time, would come to Sarada Devi and give her money and possessions. And she, being totally dispassionate that she was, she didn't like counting money even, right? So long as she would be there, there wouldn't be any dearth of money, right? But these relatives of hers were not religiously inclined. In Bengali there is a saying that just below a lamp you find more shadows, dark shadows. Similarly, the relatives of Sarada Devi were not religiously inclined. Swami Chetanananda ji in his wonderful book has given detailed accounts of all these relatives. I just end with Radhu, the girl that Sarada loved and retained her almost towards the end of her life, and finally to cut herself asunder towards the end. What happened to her, right? Radhu had often misbehaved with Sarada Devi, right? Even she had the audacity to kick her even. In those days, whom Vivekananda would be worshipping, the other monastic members would be worshipping. Sarada Devi, embarrassed, would sometimes bless Radhu and say, who would look after you when I would pass away? And this was exactly what happened to her. After Sarada Devi went away, she had been married earlier. Radhu had been married earlier. And his husband Manmatha left her. In the later days, she contracted tuberculosis and she was taken to Banaras, so that Hindus believe that if a person dies in Banaras, he would or she would have liberation. But it was then that Radhu came to her senses. She argued, what are you doing? My aunt Sarada had loved me so much. She had blessed me so much. Why do you bring me to Benares in order that I may be emancipated? I must die in Jairambati, nowhere else. And finally she had to be taken to Jairambati. And there, while uttering the name of Sarada Devi, she passed away 1940, 20 years after Sarada Devi passed away. So this lady Sarada Devi had become the pillar of the organization. This was the point that I started with, right? A monastic organization with a woman at the center. In fact, without Sarada Devi, would we have so many of our women devotees? I don't think so. A woman can understand religion more when she sees through the eyes of a woman, when she sees the behavior of another woman. who practices that in her life, right? And moreover, for monks like us, when we are caught in the storms of our monastic life, because we are human beings as well, we also need a heart, a loving heart to fall back on. When our internal enemies or the external ones, when they ravage us, trouble us, here is a mother who is ever there to say, yes, I am there, right? The wonderful image of the Kali which says, Vara and Abhaya. Vara means booms and Abhaya is saying, don't be afraid. Sarada is there. But in her other hand, she also can be fearful. She can be a governor. She can be an administrator. In fact, I had also shown you instances of that. So in this human face of Sarada Devi which we discussed, you see, it's not that we put her on a pedestal to worship merely. Through her different activities, she was very much grounded. In fact, in the Ramakrishna order, when we came in, we were used to hearing this thing. Well, you see, Sri Ramakrishna was a great sadhaka, a worshipper of God. He did tremendous amount of penances. That was wonderful. We can only revere him. But in our heart of hearts we say, we can't do that. It was great that he did. What about Swami Vivekananda? Well, he's almost like a prince. Wonderful oratory. Such a brilliant physic. Such knowledge, such memory. Able to win over all the debates. Him too, we say, well, he's a great person. A person we admire. But can I live up to him? After a point you see, it's a far cry. Vivekananda is high up there. Ma Sarada is there to guide us at every steps of our lives. When you have a quarrel in the family, when your children are not obeying you, when you have a difficulty in the office, yes, I tell you, in our monasteries also, when such apparently petty instances come to the mind, when like small pin pricks, you are pained, you are not able to express your difficulty to others, you don't require a counselor. You have the incidents of Sarada Devi to guide you. How has she behaved? How were her behavior towards others in such situations, right? In fact, we members of the order, probably you devotees also, when we hear about a historical instance, we often try to compare it with those days when they were born. Sarada Devi was born in 1853 and Ramakrishna passed away in 1886 when she was barely 33 years of age. For the next 33 years, Sarada Devi lived alone. And it was during this time that her great work started. She initiated endless number of devotees, much more than Ramakrishna did or Vivekananda formally did. In fact, it was she that carried the treasures of religion to all and sundry. And it was she that became the mother of this organization, silently. Without much fanfare, she was there to guide others, tremendously strong in her willpower. But no show, not even the show of showing compassion towards others. I'll end with a short incident, right? Sarada Devi's paternal home is in Jairambati. I believe some of you might have gone there, Jairambati. A little distance from Jairambati is a place known as Kualpada. And there, Radhu had been taken when she was about to give birth to a baby. She had inherited those peculiarities from her mother, and in those days of pregnancy, she had a peculiar behavior. And near that monastery in Kualpada, and still further off, into the lap of the village, a small hut had been built where Sarada Devi would go and stay with Radharani, expectant with a child. Well, in those days, as I said, often young men who would want to lead a religious life but had some connections with revolution would come and ask for initiation. It so happened that a young man came in. When Sarada was moving from Koalpada to that secluded monastery that was still within, here was a brahmacharin waiting on her. His name was Varada, Swami Ishanananda in later days. He understood why this young boy had come in, barely 16 or 17, right? This Ishanananda, Varada first said, well, now we are walking ahead. You come tomorrow and get initiated in the monastery. But this young man deterred. He knew that staying back in the monastery could invite police attention for the monastery. The monastery could be in trouble. So he requested that Sarada Devi should initiate him now. Bharata was perplexed in the middle of the road. How could she initiate? But imagine the presence of mind, okay? Sarada Devi said, okay, yes, I'll do that now itself. Bring some hay and make a small seat, right? And you move to a distance. And there in the middle of the road, slightly off the road, he initiated this young man, right? And after receiving the initiation, he made pranam, showed his respects to the Holy Mother, and then moved away. Because police were ever on the lookout for such revolutionaries. So she wasn't afraid at all to bestow her grace when people were genuine. Unable to withstand the call of God, such people were coming to her. How could she refuse them, right? And she had the courage, the strength of mind to protect them. Whether it was householders, whether it was genuine young men willing to go towards God, she was there, the mother, the universal mother. Even without having her own children, she had become the mother of all, right? In America, often we hear about motherhood and womanhood slightly perplexed, right? People aren't sure how these should be there in modern society. But here is a woman leading an absolutely immaculate life and yet showing us how men and women can conduct themselves in society. If you think that, well, that was an archaic example 120 years earlier, it's not true. I remember an American woman writing an article in a compilation on Sarada Devi. She writes, well, we in America had again and again talked about independence of women. But here is a woman who is worshipped as the veritable manifestation of goddess by her own husband. And in fact, she takes upon herself this mantle without show, only performing the responsibilities. Isn't this the highest manifestation of independence? Highest demonstration of empowerment? We often speak about empowerment, right? This doesn't this show that yes, woman can perform the highest deeds? So this was the life of Sarada Devi. She had guided Vivekananda, the organization, and protected her own relatives and devotees. On this special day, Mother's Day, we bow down to her. May she bless us that we may lead a life of purity and blessedness and lead good lives, all of us. Namaskar. We can have some interaction.
Do you have any question? Ask quick question.
You can make your own remarks, even questions, if questions are not there, right? Yes.
Pranam Swamiji, thanks for sharing Sharda's wonderful and simple teachings on this blessed day. We are very grateful. So one of the teachings of Ma Sharda in her own simple language, but I think it has a very profound meaning which eluded me. If you could just expound on that and let me say it in a very broken Bengali. Ja ache, aikhane ache. If you can just elaborate on that.
Ja ache, khane ache probably was the saying of Sri Ramakrishna actually, right? But still, since you have said, Sri Ramakrishna has said, what he meant probably was, I'll tell you the incident, the background, it will help you understand. When Sri Ramakrishna was passing his last days in Kashipur, he was affected with cancer. Days were only counted. The young disciples had all gathered together to serve him. But it was under this cause that they gradually fused together to form in later days the Ramakrishna mission. But within that period, once Narendra, the future Vivekananda, Tarak, the future Shivananda, and Kali, the future Abhedananda, went away from Kashipur, an area in Kolkata, to Gaya. Gaya is the place where Buddha had performed his practices. And Narendra and Tarak and Kali did great penances there. But after a few days they came back. The other brother disciples were sometimes worried because they hadn't given any information. But Ramakrishna didn't have any worries. He had said, after they returned, he smilingly said, because he was unable to talk properly, his throat was affected with cancer. She said, well, you have gone everywhere, right? He showed by a mark, right? But you have finally come in here. So Saradanandaji says, we shouldn't take it dogmatically. He says in the life of Ramakrishna, well, the liberal idea that Ramakrishna embodies in his life can include people of all places. This was the indication that you need not have any borders to obey Ramakrishna. And this is in a way true as we understand it today, is that this was what Sri Ramakrishna has said, that you can find the essence of religious teachings here. Right. Anyone else?
Is there any background why revolutionists are joining the Ramakrishna mission?
Achha, just look at the perspective. Swamiji, after returning to India, because his lectures in the West had created almost an upheaval in India, the famous researcher Shankari Prasad Bosu mentions, you see, actually India was under foreign rule. Britishers were the rulers, right? So in this inferior psyche that the country suffered from, here was a person who is lionized in the West, right? He is a person who has been lionized in America and in London as well. So in him, they find a national hero. Vivekananda was intelligent enough to understand that this euphoria would soon die down, right? And so every place that he went to, and he was adored, respected, even big gateways were built, temporary gateways for him. He spoke of the upheaval of the nation, serving the poor. Interestingly, the books on religious teachings on yoga, the 4 important yogas that Swamiji is credited by, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all of them were uttered in the West. When he went to his own country, he again and again spoke of serving the masses, raising the poor, right? This, in a sense, electrified the young men, energized them. And this was one of the causes that the famous historian Ramesh Chandra Majumdar, he says that Vivekananda should be considered to be the father of Indian nationalism. Because without going actively into politics, he was like the mantra guru, the giver of the mantra, which enthused the country as a whole to sacrifice their own professions for the country, The country is like my mother. For my motherland, I can sacrifice my career, even my own life. This impetus, this force has come from him. That is why in those days, people had wanted to join politics. Just remember the scenario, 1885, Indian National Congress has been established. 1897, Vivekananda returns. Congress is still in a very, very fluid state because Mahatma Gandhi returned a few years later and was surprised to see Congress in its form. So Congress took a proper form much later. These young men, impatient, decided to go towards revolution. They were not sure about the direction. But you know, when an impetus, when a thirst comes, a direction must come over time. And it came later on. But Vivekananda wasn't alive to see it anymore. Right?
Okay, I think you cannot take any questions.
Right.
Sorry for that. Because it is the time. So thank you very much for beautiful deliberation on Holy Mother. And actually, Swami Tyagarupananda ji covered all the facets of Holy Mother, starting from Holy Mother's spiritual administration, his motherly love, her social aspect and everything, and as a altered deity of Ramakrishna order. So he covered beautifully all these things. I thank him for beautiful deliberation. Just I conclude by chant one small hymn on Holy Mother. You know, the Prakritim Paramam is the hymn composed by Swami Abhedananda Ji Maharaj. It is sung everywhere in Ramakrishna order, and on that particular hymn, one small 4 lines is there. It says, Sneheno Badanashi. It is Sanskrit hymn. It is the first hymn on Holy Mother, and it is said, Sneheno Badnashi Monosmadiyam Doshanusheshan Shaguni Karushi Ahetu Nano Dayosesha Doshan Swanki Grihita Jadidam Vichitram. One novelist was there. His name was Rasharaj Amritalal Bosu. He commented on this particular verse that who composed that verse and on whom they must be liberated. Because in this verse it is said that it is peculiar. What is the essence, what is the quality of Holy Mother? In this 4 lines it is described. It says that Sneheno Badnasi, out of unconditional compassion, she embraced everyone. Unconditional compassion, she embraced everyone. If there is thousands of sins, by her compassion, she can transform those sins into qualities, good qualities. And then, out of love, he took everyone on her graceful lap. This is the quality of Holy Mother. She could transform everybody's sin into good things. And she took in her unconditional love on her peaceful lap and protects. That is her unique quality. If we can take shelter at her feet, whatever we did, whatever sin we have committed, he transformed these things into good. and she will protect us by taking us on her blissful lap out of unconditional compassion. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So with these comments, we shall conclude.
There was a question about Holy Mother's, all coming to Holy Mother. That could also be looked at from another perspective. Actually, there was one quotation of hers which said, well, I regard Amzad as the same as Sharat. Amzad was actually a dacoit, but he had received the grace of the Holy Mother. And Sharat was one of the purest of souls, the General Secretary of the Order. So was it that she was unaware to the blemishes or goods? She knew the character of these persons, each one of them. Was as a mother, she was above their good and bad qualities, right? It was in this sense that she could take all of them into their laps. I think I could answer a part of your question. Thank you, Maharaj.
So I think you sit here. We shall chant the Brahmarpanam here, and the food will be supplied. Okay. Let us do the Brahmarpanam here, and then we will leave, and we will leave, and then the prasad will be delivered. Om Brahmarpanam Brahmagno Brahmanam Brahmaivanantavyam Brahmacharmusamaginam Thank you. Please be seated.